Welcome to episode 19 of the Everyday Sens podcast. I'm Jack Richardson, joined by Brennan Parks. Brennan, today is Monday, June 26th. It's NHL Awards Day. We got the draft in 2 days. So naturally, we are going through our Ottawa Senators dream offseason. And not dream as in we're going to get every player we want on the Sens. Realistic dreams based on what we know going into this week. It's going to be a big week for the Ottawa Senators one way or another. So Brennan, how you doing on this Monday? The summer offseason is fully in stride here.
It is, yeah, and things are just like taking off right now. I mean, the trade market is going crazy. We've got rumors left and right. We've got huge, like massive deals between the Flyers and Blues, which are being held up, and Dubois, and now Karlsson. There's so much stuff just popping up. And again, I'll say this, like I said last time, it just doesn't feel like the draft is 2 days away to me because we've been so focused on it over the last few years, and I still right now feel like I couldn't name you the second round, like who's gonna go or anything. After being so detailed on it in years past. But like I said before, that's a good thing. And I think that rather than focusing on the draft this week, which is, by the way, Wednesday, I believe it starts at 7, the first round, Wednesday night. So we will do some sort of coverage for that, I'm sure. But rather than focusing on the prospects this year, I think we can more focus on the trade market. And then free agency opens on Saturday too. Which is exciting. So yeah, we're going to be covering a whole lot this week. I plan to have a lot of coverage. We're going to do a members pod, but today we've got a pretty exciting little segment that I've been interested in doing.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. And we'll get to that in a little bit here. First, I mentioned we're not gonna, we're getting realistic with all of our additions and subtractions this offseason. Like we're not going crazy with the cat friendly stuff. But last night, Erik Karlsson at the NHL Awards gave some interviews, and he was very, very candid, as he usually is, with reporters. And Sheng Peng, I believe that's how you pronounce it there, a reporter who covers the San Jose Sharks, is at the awards. Got some great quotes out of Karlsson, and I want to just read this one, and then we'll speculate a little bit, and then we'll move on, because it's all about fun. But maybe, at the end of the day. So he says, Karlsson even told Swedish reporters here that he was open to returning to the Ottawa Senators, who haven't made the postseason since he led them to the Eastern Conference Finals in 2017. But unlike the Sharks, the Sens have a bevy of young NHL-ready stars on the roster and are seen as a clear team on the rise. And of course, Karlsson, who flew into Nashville from Ottawa, still has a home there. I don't know how that came up. I'm sure it was in Swedish. It wasn't translated, all that. Okay, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Salary-wise, team-wise, the Sens literally don't need an offensive defenseman. But I think every Sens fan right now feels the same way, and it's like, yeah, it doesn't make any sense on paper, but man, it would be something. It would really be something if some way, it doesn't have to happen this season, but eventually Erik Karlsson comes back to Ottawa in a meaningful capacity on the ice.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm just looking because I admittedly, I mean, I liked Karlsson. He was one of my favorite players in Ottawa. And I know a lot of people are so attached to him. Like the quote that everybody keeps seeing on Twitter and what I said yesterday is, it makes no logical or financial sense for Ottawa, but just make it happen. Like just make it work. Because they could make it work in theory. I mean, if you traded, I know a lot of people have been like, oh, trade Thomas Chabot in a deal for him and like a first round pick. I don't know. I have no idea what his value is. Like I've looked at some mock trades just for the fun of it. Just kind of considering, okay, maybe because they're going to be unloading salary, San Jose, they would take lesser value. But people, man, like Sharks fans still want like a first round pick, a top prospect, a quality player plus. Like they want what we got for Karlsson, which I'm not giving that up for a 33-year-old Karlsson. I'm sorry, even with retained. But just looking at his stats, he scored 25 goals and 101 points this year, and he's going to win the Norris. Last year, he scored 35 points in 50 games. Where on earth did this 33-year-old season come from? I have to know, because the Sharks didn't get any better. If anything, they got worse. They have, the third, fifth pick in the draft, something like that. So I don't understand where this season came from. Like, that makes no sense to me. I mean, before this 101-point season, 2017-18, last season with Ottawa, 62 points. He hasn't had more than that since then. So he just jumped like 90 points. Like, that's crazy, but yeah, for Ottawa, it makes 0 sense. However, it's fun to speculate, and I put out a little mock decor yesterday of like Sanderson with Karlsson, Chabot with Chikrin, and then like it could be Clevin with Zub. The money is ridiculous. You're not paying that much for your defense, but I mean, hey, we can all dream, and you know what? I don't know how it came up either, but he said he'd be willing to come back and he'd waive his NTC, which is a nice feeling, right? Obviously, he left Ottawa and that kind of sucked, but at the same time, he still has a home here. His family loves it here, right? So if it ever were to happen, it would kind of screw up the Sens window, but it's a fun thought for sure.
here's a scenario though. If the Sharks need to move him, and they should. Like you've got this absolute like he wants out, he wants to win. He's on the back nine of his career, all that. Like this is a scenario where they're probably going to have to eat some salary. Then it becomes a little bit more feasible. Now, like we mentioned, they don't need a defenseman, and I'm not saying trade Thomas Chabot for him because I want to see both of them play together. It'd be awesome, right? But depending how the season goes for the Senators, depending how it unfolds, how the blue line works out, if Chikrin and Sanderson are kind of taking the reins and Chabot kind of struggles out of the gate again, then you can consider it maybe. But again, though, if the Sharks are looking for futures and rebuilding, do they want a 27, 26-year-old Thomas Chabot? Probably not. But he would be the guy, probably money wise. I know you mentioned him already, but look, on ice fit, yeah, it doesn't make sense for Erik Karlsson. He had 101 points, 74 were at even strength. He would have led, or I think he would have been second in defensive scoring by like 2 points. He would have been 2 points shy of Adam Fox if he didn't score a power play point this season. On the San Jose Sharks, they are like, that's unbelievable. I think that he was injured for the last 3 years, like off and on, like didn't have good off seasons. He was fully healthy this season. So the reason the on ice fit might work for the Ottawa Senators is even strength offense. That's the biggest need this summer, is to address that really, right? And what better way than to get a guy who had 74 points at even strength last year? He was I think spitballing here. He was top five, I believe, in even strength points this season, or he was up there at least. Like it was an incredible year for Karlsson, and we're talking about him now. It's pretty timely. Obviously, he's going to win his third Norris Trophy tonight. I think that's pretty fair to say. So it's going to be a good night. I'm going to like it's we got Mark Stone winning the cup, Erik Karlsson winning another Norris Trophy, and yet we're still pretty happy about where things are at in Ottawa, which is pretty impressive.
Well, the thing about Carlson is he's so likable. Like, if you listen to the way he talks to the media, and I said this before as well, I love when players are open with the media and they're very, like, they'll say whatever they want to say. They're not just kind of giving you those general quips. And Carlson, he always says what he wants to say. Like, he's very, very concise and open. And like he's swearing with the media and like in a good way though. Like I think he was talking about Mark Stone winning the cup, and he said he's going to be at Stone's party, but he's not going to touch the cup because he just wants to win his own. And he's still so bitter that he hasn't won a cup yet. Because obviously, like winning even one cup adds so much to a player's legacy, right? So, he definitely would be someone who I would love to have back. I mean, it's so hard to say, I don't want Karlsson because of his money. I know it doesn't make sense, but when you can not only get a player of his caliber, but someone who is so like desperate to win, like Ottawa needs to win, and Karlsson wants to win more than maybe anybody in the league based on his kind of timeline. Just for speculation's sake, what would you be willing to give up for him in a trade? Because I know, like, would you be willing to give next year's first, say unprotected, and then you know what? Let's not say Chabot. Let's say next year's first, Artem Zub, Ridley Gregg, Matthew Joseph. I don't even know. I'm losing myself here because I mean you have to clear money, right? So if you do Zub and Joseph, and then you give a top prospect in Gregg and a first round pick, and they retain 50%.
I honestly, I think I would. It's tough. Like I would do that. I would, but I think I'd try and load it up more with younger guys, like not even a guy like Greg, like maybe like players who haven't really established themselves that still have some value, like a Stopchuk maybe.
Yeah, I was about to say that.
Like he's I mean, and we'll get into him with some mock rosters here in a little bit, but yeah, like that's what I would be doing. I know that, and this isn't out of thin air from Karlsson. Like I think it was reported around the deadline that the Sens were kicking tires on him. And I think the Leafs were also kicking tires on him. I think Mark Mathot actually might have tweeted out that there's no way Karlsson's going to the Leafs, which I love that too. Like he's got Ottawa in his veins, right? And I think if Daniel Alfredson, if/when he comes back into the fold, that'll make it all the more likely. Like I don't know. I mean, maybe I doubt that this happens, but maybe the Sharks buy him out or something like that. Like I don't know. I doubt they would, but it's still there's a lot of possibility here. With it's a unique scenario. It's not often that a team that's top five lottery was just dreadful all season has a Norris Trophy winning defenseman on their team. I don't think it's ever happened. And I'm saying Norris Trophy winning unless something absolutely insane happens. I think he should be not unanimous, but he'll win. He'll win tonight. But yeah, I'm hopefully I'm not dating myself by saying Norris Trophy winning defenseman if he loses out to Adam Fox or Makar tonight.
I mean, I think he's gonna win for sure. Like that's I think it's a given at this point. Yeah, Alfie's another kind of key point though, eh? If he comes back in and I mean he's almost guaranteed, not guaranteed, but he's pretty well gonna be back in the organization. And obviously he was kind of Karlsson's mentor and they're great friends and now I mean Alfie I'm sure would be the first one to be like, hey Michael, I think we should spend big on Erik
Well,
Karlsson.
well, it depends what Alfie's role is. If he's a president, if he's like, something of hockey operations, he will legitimately have a say in what they do and who they trade for. So obviously he's going to be like, yeah, let's go get this guy. And not that Dorian wouldn't. I think Dorian would too. He knows him almost better than anyone else in that front office at the moment. Probably better than anyone else except for Daniel Alfredson. Dorian is actually, I think he was hired as the chief amateur scout the year they drafted Karlsson. And I remember there's a story about him vouching for Karlsson at the draft table and like kind of putting his neck on the line in front of Brian Murray. And it worked out in spades. It was one of the best. It's probably one of the best draft picks in Ottawa Senators history. And yeah, so he was I think probably for you too, my favorite player growing up. It was perfect. Like got to watch him grow. He won Norris trophies here. He was third best player in the NHL at one point for sure, like behind McDavid and Crosby. Like he was so special, and it would be awesome to see him with an actual team around him. No offense to those other Senators teams, especially in 2017, but the talent assembled right now is not like nothing we've seen before in Ottawa, and it'd be really special to see Erik Karlsson here.
Yeah, I mean the talent, like you talk about that. I know Ottawa was a consistent playoff team for the 2010 decades, but like their talent was never really good enough to be a Stanley Cup winner. Maybe the 2017 team, but even then they were statistically worse than they actually performed. They kind of had that little miraculous playoff run like Florida, but yeah, Karlsson with this score would be completely ridiculous. I still don't get how he even scored 101 points on San Jose with the talent on that team. I'm surprised they even scored 101 goals. Like I can't. That's what I see when I'm looking at that team. But yeah, it speaks to how good he is, and I mean, I just Erik Karlsson, like, could you imagine him coming back in Ottawa with the 2D logo and everything? I'm just even having trouble imagining that. But yeah, he was my favorite player growing up too. I think he's not what the Sens need, but he's what they deserve. Like, let's put it that way. He's kind of like that would come full circle. You can still see if you go and you look at the trade tree from when we sent him to San Jose. Like, that is still paying dividends. They got Stützle, they got Norris, they actually got Ostapchuk. Maralainen was part of that trade tree. And I think there was another key piece or two as well from that.
I think it was Sogard, wasn't it?
Sogard too, yeah. I think they traded the pick down and then they got Sogard. So that's completely absurd. And then you get Karlsson back, that'd be hilarious. But yeah, financially, I mean, make it work, Pierre, I guess. The Caps expected to jump. You could kind of justify this if you really wanted to. Notably, though, when they were kicking tires on him, I guess that was before they acquired Chychrun, so it was kind of like they were just in the market for that type of guy. And if they didn't acquire Chychrun, if their offer got rejected by Arizona and they still didn't have that fit, this would be a very serious discussion. Like, if they did not pull the trigger on Chychrun right now and they were still lacking that top right defenseman, especially because Karlsson actually shoots right, I think he'd almost be like seriously linked to Ottawa instead of kind of just this fun, maybe it'll happen, whatever type thing. But now that they have Chychrun, it's kind of solved. I don't really see it happening, but it is a fun discussion. I think regardless, we can be happy for Erik and how he bounced back to 101 points as a 33-year-old. Like, my God.
Yeah, it's incredible. So yeah, we'll move off of Erik Karlsson. Maybe we'll talk about it again, but the on ice fit is questionable, but the off ice fit would just, I mean, maybe also questionable. It's not, he wouldn't be the captain anymore. Lots to work out there, but it's more of a pipe dream at this point. I like, we both mentioned favorite player growing up. We want to see him win. I want to see him go to a contender somehow, some way, find a way to a team that can win a cup next season or in the next few years. So we'll move on off of that and just let's get into the off season here. Let's do it. It's like you mentioned, draft week, free agency on Saturday. Not a lot of time between the draft and free agency. I think that's a bit new. So I can understand why maybe a June 28th with the draft deadline is favorable for teams in terms of trades. And we know that that's been pretty public with the Ottawa Senators and Alex DeBrincat. We don't know what's going to happen. They've done a good job of saying anything is possible. And I'm quoting Alex DeBrincat there at the end of the season saying, I'm open to anything. So let's dive into the market, right? I think Alex DeBrincat is unanimously right now the second highest commodity on the market in terms of trade. Pierre-Luc Dubois in Winnipeg is the first. A centerman, big top line, second line centerman, like those don't grow on trees. I understand. I think we both understand why he's more valuable. Doesn't take away from DeBrincat though. DeBrincat is still a very, very valuable piece. The reason the market matters to me is because Dubois is probably going to be the first domino to fall, and that trade will set the tone for DeBrincat's trade because it seems like, and whether Jets fans agree with it or not, it seems like the Jets are trying to pivot into a hockey trade and try to keep this thing going when they can. So the Sens are absolutely trying to do that. If they get futures, they're probably going to try and flip them. So with that in mind, Brennan, let's dive into Cap Friendly, which is just an absolutely insane tool that's available for people. Do you want to go ahead first and just kind of run through? So we did the NHL roster. We filled out the NHL roster, didn't sign AHL deals. Yeah, so that's what we did. And Brennan, you can take it away here with your Cap Friendly mock off season for the Ottawa Senators.
Okay, so I will throw mine up here first. So I've got my RFAs showing. I can do this like section by section. So I did sign kind of the AHL guys too, but I just qualified them for their like 1 year offers. So I signed Pinto, 3 years, 2.5 million bridge. So we talked about potentially what they would get in one of the last episodes, and I kind of reverted my thinking because when you actually go and you use Cap Friendly, and if you haven't, it's basically just a tool where you can put like everything. It's everything. You're essentially the Ottawa Senators GM. You can sign players, you can trade players, you can do whatever you want to do, and it puts it into the lineup for you. You can shuffle players around. If you've ever played the NHL games, it is be a GM mode, just without the actual simulations. So Shane Pinto, 3 years, 2.5 million. I think it's reasonable. I think maybe he gets a little more, but I also could see him getting a little less, and maybe for 2 years, 2.2 million was something I considered. I don't think he's going to get 3. I think he'll be fine with 2.5. That's reasonable. DeBrincat, spoiler, he's been traded, but I signed him for 8 years at 8.5 because it's a sign and trade. We'll get to the trade in a minute. I then signed Brannstrom for 2 years at 1.5 million. I was debating going longer term with this. I liked 3 or 4 years, but I figured to make it work, I did 2 years, 1.5. Brannstrom might want to take less term because he wants to bet on himself, maybe find a top 4 role somewhere else in a couple of years. Just because I'm sure he's not stupid. He's looking at Ottawa's decor like there's not a lot of space. So I think 2 years, 1.5 is fair. Qualified, Sokolov, Mandalize, Bernard Docker, 1 year for all of them, and then Julien Gauthier as well as a depth piece, 1 year, 840,000, which is his qualifying offer. So from there, we can go down to UFAs, I guess. I'll do UFAs and then I'll jump into trades. So UFAs, now this is where it gets a little bit fun. So Corey Perry, I know, I signed 4 UFAs. Corey Perry, 1 year, 1.2 million. Now, we wanted to use the AFP Analytics spreadsheet, which projects every single contract for free agents this summer. So primarily, I did use that. I actually paid Perry more than it said on there. It said he would sign for 1 year, 850K. I thought a little premium to come to Ottawa because I figured maybe Toronto will make a bid for him. So 1 year, 1.2 million for Perry. Semyon Varlamov in net. Now, I like the idea of a tandem. I love Semyon Varlamov, and I had to actually make a trade a little bit bigger to clear money for this because it was not working and it took me way too long to do. Varlamov, 2 years at 2.7 million is what he's projected on AFP Analytics. Varlamov's actually been one of the better goalies, one of the better backups in the league for a few years now. He was a Vezina finalist a few years ago as well. I like him at 2 years, even though he's a bit older. And then Calvin DeHaan, 1 year, 850,000, can play either side. Depth defenseman, he's an addition. Just because I figure if Bernard Docker's not working out or whatever happens, he's still not solidified, you need a depth defenseman of some sort. He's basically a cheaper Travis Hamonic, and he was a pretty good defenseman for Carolina last year as a 7. And then Zach Aston Reese. And I know this is a lot of signings, but they are depth guys. Like, it's not like I'm going out and signing anyone huge here, which may be to your surprise because I did trade Alex DeBrincat. So who's going to replace Alex DeBrincat is the big question. Before we get to that, Zach Aston Reese, 2 years, 1 million. Good defensive forward who scored some goals for Toronto this year. I mean, it's $1 million. He's like an upgrade on Austin Watson in my mind, and he's pretty physical. Okay, do you want to go through your free agents first now? I guess, yeah, you said it would show your trade, eh? Okay, I'll do my trade. So, let's see where I'm at here. My first trade, you can see them both. Philip Tomasino, a first-round pick in 2023, Edmonton, which is 24th overall, and a 2023 third-round pick, which is 68th overall for Alex DeBrincat. So that's DeBrincat to Nashville for Tomasino, 24th overall pick this year, and the 68th pick this year. This is not my super ideal trade, just because I think Ottawa would like to get a middle six player back in return as well. I projected projected 5 mock trades on my latest article, and this was one of them. This was my favorite just because I'm really high on Tomasino. He's a prospect. He ranked 33rd on Scott Wheeler's January prospect ranking, and he's a guy who I think can play on their second line even and be a power play producer. He really lit it up at the World Juniors a couple of years ago, and he was a first round pick in 2019. So then anyway, the point of getting the 24th overall pick is to flip it, because if you're not watching on YouTube, you haven't seen this yet. It's Travis Konechny, and this is my guy. This is who I really want Pierre to go after. Is it realistic? I don't know, but they have been kind of linked to him in the past, and he obviously played his junior career in Ottawa for the 67s. He said he really loved his time in Ottawa as well, so I think there are some connections there. Konechny is signed for 2 more years at $5.5 million, and the trade is Tyler Boucher, Matthew Joseph, 2023 first, so that's the first I got for DeBrincat, is being flipped, so 24th overall is being flipped to Philadelphia, and a first round pick next year. And this is a hefty price. I know it's a hefty price, but I went through and I looked at what Flyer fans want for Konechny and kind of what the rumored mock trades and the value is. And the fact that Daniel Briere is turning down first round picks for Scott Lawton pushed me towards knowing I needed to maybe overpay a little bit. But at the same time, like, we have to bet on ourselves. That first round pick next year should be considered like 17th to 25th overall. That's not going to be a top 10 pick. That should be later. And if it is a top 10 pick, something went horribly wrong and the Sens don't deserve it. So I'm going for Konechny here, because I think he's a guy. He just actually went over a point per game, scored 31 goals, had more 5v5 points than DeBrincat did this year. I think he is a step down from DeBrincat based on his career, but at the same time, he's a year older, signed for a nice contract, 2 more years, and then you can kind of make a decision from there. Probably sign him long term at like $7 million, something like that, which is cheaper than DeBrincat, which gives you cap flexibility. And then Ottawa also dumps Matthew Joseph's contract in this deal to make space for the other UFA signings I had. In my mind, I wanted to bring a goalie in, so that was kind of my alternative to keeping Joseph, was to sign Varlamov. And yeah, I mean, I highly do recommend you guys watch this on YouTube if you can, just because we're probably going to be talking a lot and it's going to be hard to track, but we are showing everything on YouTube on the screen. So again, I'll just go through one more time. DeBrincat to Nashville for Tomasino, first round pick this year, and a third round pick this year as well. And then I go to Philadelphia. I get Konechny for the first round pick we got for DeBrincat, Ottawa's first round pick next year, Tyler Boucher and Matthew Joseph. And then you can do yours, and I guess we can go through the lines after that.
First, I'll comment on that. So that basically washes out to Boucher, Joseph, DeBrincat, and the 2024 first, for Konechny, Tomasino, and a third. Like
I'm
that's
content.
like, I think that, but I mean, that's a pretty big roster. I don't want to say overhaul, but like, I guess you're just kind of subbing in, say, Tomasino for Joseph and then Konechny for DeBrincat at a wash. I like it. I like it. The only issue I have with Konechny, and it's not an issue really, because obviously he'd be perfect. You then all of a sudden put a lot of pressure on the next 2 years, because you've got Giroux, Chychrun, and then now Konechny all being UFAs at the end of those 2 seasons. Which again, it's not an issue. You gotta go for it at the end of the day. And it wouldn't turn me away from Konechny. It's a factor, right? And especially when you don't have that 2024 first down the line. But
I'm just looking at the cap expected to rise though too, because in 3 years it's supposed to be like 92.5, like 10 million from where it is now. So I'm kind of hoping that happens, and then you've got space for Konechny, for Chychrun, for everybody.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Yeah, I'm not even like, it's just you gotta get worried about maybe a guy pricing himself out, just even with that cap hit. Like, it's gonna happen. Like Chychrun probably, and same with Konechny. Giroux, I'm not worried about losing. It's just a matter of expiring deals, right? Because all these long-term deals are working out, but then you eventually are gonna have to re-sign them again in, like, 3-4 years for some of those guys. So I like that. That's you went a little bit harder on the trade front than I did. So I'll pivot over to mine here. And I want to preface a couple things. So just go to, I'm going to start with my trade, because that kind of sets the tone for everything else. Because I think it'll happen first. I think the trade would happen first, like you mentioned. I'm assuming like the DeBrincat deal would go down before what, like, all the RFA signings and stuff like that, probably, right? So okay, let's do this. So I'm not techie, so there we go. Okay. All right, so you can see at the bottom, I have moved DeBrincat to the New York Rangers, and it might be a slight, like a not very overwhelming return. But you gotta hear me out here, okay? So first, I didn't actually sign DeBrincat to a deal. So you did like the sign and trade thing, right? I'm assuming, or did you sign him when?
Like when I traded to Brinkett.
Yeah,
So
because
yeah, I
I saw
signed him
you.
for 8 times 8.5 and then flipped him. So technically they
Okay,
signed him, but Ottawa just facilitated it. So
okay. So I because I saw that when you saw the RFAs, and I'm like, oh, you're keeping DeBrincat, but yeah. So I didn't give him a deal. But the thing is with the Rangers, maybe you can get a first out of them for that. I think Lafreniere is the biggest piece. So for the people who aren't watching on YouTube, I've traded Alex DeBrincat to the New York Rangers for Barclay Goodrow, Alexi Lafreniere's RFA rights, and a 2024 second round pick from the Rangers. It's not a very overwhelming haul. The thing is, I think like first overall picks, 3 years removed, don't usually get moved. And I don't think he's shown that he's not capable of being an NHL player. First of all, he's an ideal middle six option for the Sens right now. This guy was a first overall pick for a reason 3 years ago. He was not, this. He was the consensus number one pick 3 seasons ago in a stacked draft, and I think most Rangers fans would tell you he just hasn't had the development opportunity that guys like Stutzel and Lucas Raymond have had. So that's not his fault. So I'm betting on Lafreniere a lot with this deal. And the reason Goodrow is there because I think it solves a couple things for Ottawa. He's a salary dump for the Rangers. They got to move money out to take DeBrincat anyway, and I don't even think this works for the Rangers yet. Like they probably still have to make more moves to make the cap work. Goodrow is signed for 4 more years, 3 more years at like 3.4, I believe. And it's reported that the Rangers are looking to move him, trying to get him to waive his no trade clause. He has a modified no trade clause, so I think it's 8, 10 teams or something like that. Assuming Ottawa's on it, I don't know. But he's won 2 cups or 1 cup. Like he won a Stanley Cup. He was a middle, like third line, fourth line guy when that happened. I believe he was on that line in Tampa in that first season with Blake Coleman, Yanni Gord, and him. Like he was the prototypical you're winning a cup with a guy like that in your bottom six. So that to me is I don't know if it solves scoring issues. It doesn't really probably. It's a big bet on Alexi Lafreniere. But I was going through all the teams and yeah, Philly's enticing. Like, but again, you got to make more moves. I looked at Nashville too, and I don't buy. I don't know if I buy that Nashville is interested in. I guess buying a guy like DeBrincat for such long term because you look at their players right now. They've got Yossi who's older, Duchesne. They moved Johansson, and then their younger guys are like, who do they have that's younger? Really, not like Tomasino, Evangelista. Like,
yeah, well, my only thing with Nashville is that Trotz came in and they kind of said like they don't really want to tear everything down, so they're kind of in limbo. Like I
yeah,
don't know which way they want to go, but yeah, we'll see.
yeah, true. And look, honestly, maybe DeBrincat would be the trade that kind of signals that they're doing this or whatever. I like Lafreniere. I like the idea of him coming to Ottawa. He's the big piece. I don't like how Goodrow is the number one on there because Lafreniere was the big piece. Yeah, like I could get behind maybe getting Lafreniere and then a bunch of like a couple other picks instead of Goodrow. I just think you're gonna have to take money back when you're moving a guy like DeBrincat for the Rangers. I don't think this is gonna be very popular with a lot of people, but I think it's a realistically underwhelming trade that like it won't be a blow your socks off. I like this one too because there's no 2023 picks involved. It doesn't have to happen this week. It doesn't have to happen tomorrow. It can be middle of July, end of July before DeBrincat's arbitration date. Like I like it for that reason too. Okay, so again, Lafreniere's the big piece here. I'm gonna go to my RFA signings. Um, block the UFA. You see some cap hits there. Actually, you know what? Let's just do it all. Okay. So RFAs didn't do everyone, so it's a little tight right now. I'm money is kind of like I just did little decimals. Like it doesn't really like I got Lafreniere at 1.75 for 2 years. Pinto I got 1.5 for 2 years. That's probably pretty cheap, but like I don't know if you want to give him an extra couple 100,000. Like I don't know. I could see Pinto and Lafreniere getting the exact same contract. I think. And then I've got Brandstrom at 1.25. I think you had him at 1.5, right?
Yeah,
For
1.5. Yeah.
yeah, like it's gonna be in that vicinity for those guys. I think they can get Pinto for under two. I really do think
That'd
they
be
can.
awesome. Yeah.
And then I've got JBD at 800, whatever his qualifying offer was. I didn't qualify him. I just signed him 2 years, 1 year. Big thing for him is it's going to be a one-way deal. And then, okay, UFAs. So this is where I put the money. I put the money in the UFA market, and this is why I think this trade can wait and until after July 1st. Because if goaltending is your biggest issue, you can sign Frederick Anderson to a 4.5, 4.75, whatever. I like Anderson. I like him. I think he's ideal for a tandem. He's expensive. I know I'm kind of contradicting everything I've said about like spending that much money on a goalie, but I tried to look at the trade market for another goalie in the DeBrincat trade. It's hard. It's hard to find a good fit. Um, so this is the guy. I looked at Tristan Jarry. I think on the UFA market for goalies, I think Anderson's probably the top guy for me. I don't see anyone better. So I'd be comfortable with that. He's 33, I think, maybe 32. So I'm comfortable with 3 years. I think if you maybe up the term a little bit, you can get the cap hit down, kind of thing. And then I got Corey Perry at 1.2, same as you but I got 2 years for Corey Perry. I again, like a lot of these signings are it's more about the player, and because I think the cap hit will be in that vicinity. I didn't use that Google Doc, but I remember we were going through the spreadsheet. This was the vicinity of what they were going to get.
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah.
Yeah, Frederick Anderson, he made 4.5 last year, a little bit of a raise. Like, I doubt he'll take a huge discount. And again, we'll call it the Ottawa tax. You're probably going to have to pay guys a bit more to come here. Um, yeah, so that's like this whole exercise for me was built around look, okay, you got two middle six options in Goudreau and Lafreniere from the Rangers. And I think Goudreau is I don't say an upgrade, but worst case Ontario, he's playing on your fourth line. And yeah, it's an expensive fourth liner, but it looks good if you can have a Goudreau with a Kastelik and a whoever and a Corey Perry, and then your third line can be a Pinto Joseph, uh, Ridley Gregg mix or something like, or one of the entry level guys. Like I like that outlook. And then I've got, I mean, we'll get into our lineup here in a little bit, but I've got Lafreniere with Norris and Batherson, essentially just taking DeBrincat's spot. Yeah, like I think people seeing Barclay Goodrow is going to be like a bit of a whoa, what are we doing here? I like the player. I like the idea of his kind of play in the playoffs. Um, Again, though, it doesn't. The only thing that this doesn't really address is the 5-on-5 scoring. But I'm banking on Batherson, Norris, like those guys having bounce back years at even strength. That's my bet because I don't like. I looked at Seattle. I looked at Seattle because I think Garriock mentioned them for DeBrincat, like they need some scoring help or whatever. Every player on Seattle that is signed to more than 2 years has a modified no trade clause. It's insane. Every single one of them. All their big guys have modified no trade clauses. So that, I mean, I kind of just saw those and got a little turned away from it. But yeah, I'll take the heat. I'll take the heat for this. I'm curious what you think. I don't think you're a fan of Barkley, but let's just give me your thoughts on the numbers and the signings and Lafreniere.
Yeah, I don't love Goodrow, but at the same time, I do think the Rangers have to make money, have to move money out to make this work. I was just looking at them on Cap Friendly here, and Barclay makes 3.6 basically million for the next 4 years. And the problem with the Rangers is that they have to re-sign K'Andre Miller, and then they have to replace Patrick Kane, Tyler Mott, Vladimir Tarasenko, and they've only got like 10 million in cap space right now. So yeah, moving Goodrow out definitely I think does make this work. Which is why I'm kind of confused as to when people say, like, I know Garriock too looked at some of these teams and he said they don't have the cap space, so they probably won't. Like, he looked at Vegas and Florida and said that you can pretty much rule them out because they don't have the space. But really, if you're acquiring a guy like DeBrincat, I think it's fairly easy to move money out. Like, teams can kind of do cap dumps if they want to acquire a better player. And whether Goodrow's involved with Ottawa or not, they could still dump him somewhere else if they had to, right? So regardless, I'm really high on Lafreniere. I like him a lot. If they're like low-key, I've been kind of drooling over the potential of acquiring Lafreniere if this could happen. The second round pick I think is good too. I think that's fair value. I mean, maybe you could try and bump them up just because they have kind of a cap dump there too. You might be able to pull a first. I don't know. I mean, I try not to be too biased with it. So
I thought, well, they don't have a 2023 second. I thought about or a first. I mean, I didn't try. I just thought maybe like you throw a condition on the second, it becomes a first if I don't know if the Rangers make the playoffs or make the first, second, third round. Like I think that would be. I think that pick could be conditional. But yeah, like I'm happy with the value. I'm happy with that value. It seems like a cap dump where you're taking Goudreau. But I don't really see it that way. I think he kind of not solves, but he can add an element for the Senators like that they kind of been missing, like a veteran guy who has been there. They don't have anyone on their team with a lot of playoff experience. Even Claude Giroux, for all that matter, like he's played in the playoffs, but hasn't really made a run since his rookie season. When you think about it, right? And he's got the most playoff experience on this team. So I know people roll their eyes at playoff experience, but it's gonna matter come time. And I think a move like this will help that locker room in terms of knowing what to do during a season. Like and I said the Ottawa tax. This is the Tampa tax because he's been on those winning teams in Tampa Bay. That's valuable to me, and I would be okay taking a contract like that.
Yeah, and Goodrow too, I mean, for what it's worth, he's not just a terrible player with a bad contract. Like, he's a physical guy. He had 122 hits this year, 130 last year, but he scores too. Like, he would definitely be an upgrade in the bottom six because that's what Ottawa was lacking. Like, Austin Watson is a physical guy, but he doesn't really provide a whole lot in the way of offense. Goodrow did score 11 goals and 31 points this year, and he scored 33 last year, which is far better than what Ottawa was getting. Like, I mean, we thought Derek Brassard was good this year offensively in the bottom six just because they had nothing else, right? So I think Goodrow would be a contributor. I don't think that taking on his cap hit is overly non like bad for Ottawa in this case, just because I think you can get Lafreniere at a good price for at least a few years. I don't think Laf is going to be signing a mega deal just based on what he's done so far anytime soon. Maybe when he's older, but I guess people will look at this and they will be underwhelmed. And I wrote this in my article too, is you're going to be underwhelmed just because when you think of trading a 40 goal scorer into Brinkett, you're thinking of, we're going to get a blue chip prospect back. Like, we're going to get, like, for example, from Detroit, we're going to get Marco Casper. We're going to get a first round pick, 9th overall. Like, this is what DeBrincat goes for. The reality is that he's not going to, even signed, he's not going to get that much. You're going to look at kind of trying, and I hated this at first, but I've come around to the idea. You're just trying to kind of get assets. Like, Lafreniere is fairly unproven. Like, he's an NHL player, but he's not near DeBrincat's level yet, but he still has potential. And that's kind of what my ideal target is in a trade, is a guy who can play now, who, for me, it was Tomasino, who I feel like can come in. He can play on the Sens now. He's played a couple seasons, and he's not going to be like DeBrincat's level, but he has a high ceiling, right? And he's going to be cost effective. And that's a big thing too, is DeBrincat is going to cost you like $9 million for 8 years. Whereas these guys can come in, maybe give you half the production or whatever it is, but they're going to cost you like way less, and you can fill out the other holes. In your case, you got Freddie Anderson, right? You've just gotten a starting goaltender basically. And Anderson I like too. Yeah, 3 years, it's a little risky with his age, but not, I mean, goalies get older. He had a bit of a down year this year with the .902 save percentage, 2.59 GSAX, but last year he had a .922 save percentage and 28.46 GSAX, which is like very like high level elite starting qualities. So I think Anderson, he can come in and be that kind of solidified presence in the crease, and also like don't forget about Forsberg. I mean, if they play, even a tandem role, that's a big win right there compared to what they might be rolling with the risk of Forsberg and Sogard. So I do like that a lot for sure. Kind of excited to see your lines. I know you touched on them. I can do my lines first here just because we're kind of rotating. But yeah, that's a good trade. I think that is realistic too. I think, like, I don't know that Rangers fans want to move Lafreniere, but if you're getting DeBrincat and you can afford it, I think it would work, right? So I will go back to my lines here if I can figure out. Yeah, okay. So my lines. Now, I just want to preface this by saying I did go for balance a little bit. I didn't just stack the top six. I did try to go for a bit of balance, and I think that I like the way it worked out just based on the fact that you now get 4 lines who can all contribute. I'm being a little optimistic with Tomasino, but that's okay because I think it will work. So I've got, I'll try and zoom in here. For forwards, I've got the first line is staying together. Tkachuk, Stützle, Giroux. So that line worked. We know that. Everything behind them was kind of this past year. Second line, Konechny, Norris, Tomasino. Now, this is where I'm being a little optimistic with Tomasino because he's on the second line, and people might not like that because he's young, he's kind of unproven. But at the same time, like, Tomasino played, so he was over a point per game as a rookie in the AHL a few years ago. He played a full season for Nashville, scored 32 points in 76 games as a 19-year-old or 20-year-old. This past year, he split between the AHL and NHL. They wanted to give him opportunity in the AHL, but he still scored on a 50-point pace in the NHL through 31 games, which is, like, I'll take that on the second line. I mean, he's a very highly touted prospect who, and Scott Wheeler, who did the prospect rankings and put him 33rd a few months ago, said like he sees him as a guy who can play on the second line with power play time. He's a very offensively skilled and gifted player, which is, I think, what Ottawa likes to have because he's not a liability defensively either. And if you watch Team Canada at the 2021 World Juniors, you'll know Tomasino because he scored, I think, 7 points in 6 games for them there. And he's a guy who I'm really high on him. I like him a lot. I'd love if Ottawa could pull him or a similar type of guy. And just going back to that trade, like Luke Evangelista is another high Nashville prospect, but I was reading their forums and I was reading what Predators fans were saying, and they did not want to part with him. So I figured Nashville's probably in the same boat. I'm just going to take Tomasino, who's below him a little bit, but that's okay with me because he's a great prospect. So you get Konechny on the left side. Then your third line is Ridley Gregg, who I feel is ready to make that jump for sure. Shane Pinto and Drake Batherson. Now, if you compare this to Ottawa's third line of I can't even name their third line this past year. It's like Joseph, Gambrell, and Patrick Brown half the time. Like, if you compare Gregg, Pinto, and Batherson to that trio, we are light years ahead of where we were last year. And I think that line can both produce and play defensively. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, this was the second line for a little bit. They had, I think they had Greg Pinto and
Yeah.
Batherson or some combination, like for a little bit at least.
That's my goal too, is just like being able to balance this. And I know maybe Tomasino's not an ideal fit on the second line yet. I think he'd be a good Giroux replacement too in the future, by the way. But anyways, I think having the balance of having that top nine where each line can go out and they don't really have a weakness. Like, each line is going to go out there and produce. They're physical, they're gritty, they're defensive. They don't have a weakness. And then your fourth line, I have Zach Aston Reese, who I signed, Mark Kastelik, and Corey Perry. And I think that's just kind of your Kastelik's young, but it's almost like your gritty veteran fourth line who you know is going to go out there and battle and be intimidating and not get exposed like they did with Watson and Gambrell last year half the time as well. So yeah, that's my forward group. I like that a lot. Again, you can see it on YouTube. I think I'm gonna make a post too on social media where I'll put our lineups out just so people can see it. And then we'll go to defense. So Thomas Chabot and Jacob Chikrin. People like the idea of stacking the left side, having one of the top three defensemen on the ice at all times. I don't hate the idea, but I still would like to see that top four kind of be bolstered and not really have any liabilities or weaknesses. Second pairing, Sanderson and Zub. And then third pairing, Brandstrom, Bernard Docker. And then my scratches, I've got Gauthier, Kelly, and DeHaan. Again, if Bernard Docker's struggling, I think DeHaan can kind of slide in there if you need that veteran presence, because I think he'd be a guy who can kind of bounce off of and complement Brandstrom if necessary. So that's my kind of insurance policy. And then at goalie, I've got Forsberg and Varlamov splitting. They just would split games. Forsberg would probably play the majority. Varlamov would maybe take 25 or 30 at his age. But I think he would give you a really good 25 or 30 games, and you're not going to have those games that the goalie costs you. So that is my lineup. And yeah, I feel pretty good about that. And honestly, like, if the Konechny trade's a little too bold, you could substitute that for using the cap space, keeping the first round pick. So Edmonton's first round pick, for example, drafting a player with that, and then signing somebody like Killorn or Connor Brown, even if it's a bit of a downgrade, but still could play that role and provide you with maybe 50 points, right? And then you'd have the additional space to sign somebody else too. So just in general, I think Ottawa has a lot of potential with this DeBrincat trade. Like, it's the cap space, it's the assets. They have a lot of potential to make something happen here, and it's all on Pierre Dorion and the pro scouts. So have fun with that, Pierre, because this week I want to see some action. I want to look at Twitter. I want to get the notification that some big stuff is going down. Don't be sitting on the sidelines.
Yeah, get active, Pierre. That's what we're saying. Get us something to talk about. Basically, is what we're pleading with, and maybe, hey, look at this and be like, hey, yeah, maybe read the comments after. And on that note, like, comment, and subscribe to the YouTube page as you're watching. If you're listening on the audio, thank you. Leave us a rating there, but then head over to the YouTube page so you can actually see our rosters and how they're made up. I'm noticing your blue line there. I have the absolute exact same thing. I think it's pretty set in stone.
It's just locked.
Assuming it's JBD's spot to lose, quoted twice from Pierre Dorion. Like, he'll be, I think, at least to start the season, he'll be there. Yeah, I like that. And then goaltending, I think that's pretty standard. Like you have Varlamov at 2.7 or 2.75? Like, is it the same deal as Forsberg?
2.7. I think that's what he was on the AFP analytics. Yeah, 2
Okay,
years,
okay,
2
yeah.
years, 2.7. Yeah.
So basically twin contracts for the goalies. I like that too. I like that a lot. Yeah, and Corey Perry in that fourth line. So I'll show mine now. Pretty similar, I would say, which when you put in perspective of how similar they are kind of in terms of the lineup, it's obvious what the Sens need. And like, that's a good thing, right? It's not like we're signing a guy who's going to replace Giroux or Kachuk. Like, we don't need to do that. They don't need to do that.
It's
They
just a
need
matter of
to-
assessing the right players, though, because you
Exactly.
could very easily fall into the free agency trap and sign somebody who's a little mediocre, maybe a downgrade, and they
Yeah.
overpay for him. They get desperate, right? That's what I'm nervous about.
Yeah, so I think for sure of all the moves we've made, I think Konechny is the best player and like most enticing thing. Like, I'm all over. I love Travis Konechny. The trade is just complex, and you got to have a dance partner, and that's the hardest part about this, right? So here's my lineup here. All right, so I got obviously same top line. I put Lafreniere with Norris and Batherson on the second line. I don't want to split up Norris and Batherson yet. I need to see them again because, like we mentioned last episode, that chemistry that they have is special. Norris scores so many goals and Batherson does so well because they play together, I think. Then I got Gaudreau, Pinto, and Joseph. I don't know if that's considered an expensive third line. It probably is just based on how much money they're all making, but you're pinching pennies with Lafreniere and Batherson on the second line anyway. So I think you can get away with that. Again, though, this just creates we've seen Joseph play with Kachuk and Norris and have success. Like I think this top nine has the potential to be jumbled, like you said. I'm just kind of slotting it like this right now because I'd love to see Lafreniere just play. I got to stop getting my hopes up, man, because Lafreniere he'd be so perfect, I think, for this team. Just long term, short term, all of it. And then fourth line, I've got Greg, Kaslik, Corey Perry. Again, that Greg, like the Sens have so many guys in that 800K range to be on entry level deals. Like they've got a lot of guys who can sub in like a Stopchuk or Yarventi. Like they've got a lot of players to do that. So that's kind of just a tentative spot. And I didn't put him as a scratch, but I got Parker Kelly and then Tyler Cleven's my scratch for the D. But again, that can move around. I've only got 2 scratches though because I ran out of cap space. But I mean that's where it's like when I'm saying, like 1.75, 1.5, 1.25, like those numbers actually do matter. It's just more of a structuring. Like I think Lafreniere will get more money than Pinto on the Sens. I think just based on the reputation, which might sound crazy if you're Pinto's agent and Shane Pinto being like, I just scored 20 goals in my rookie season and I'm not getting more than a guy who's been on the third line on a playoff team. Like, I don't know. But anyway, yeah. And then defense, same thing. Like nothing's changing there. I've got Anderson as the starter over Forsberg at that price tag. You would hope he is. And again, maybe you can get him for less than that. But if I'm dipping into the free agent market on a goalie, I like Varlamov too. But if I'm going to do that, like we've talked about, I know that Frederik Andersen is an upgrade on Mads Søgaard. Reputation-wise, Varlamov is for sure. I just, with his age and where he is, like, if he's just going to come in and be a backup, essentially, I think Søgaard can take 30% of the games, is what I mean there. Sorry. So I like Frederik Andersen too, because in the event that Forsberg can't play because of his ACLs or something goes up, he's not playing well, I think this is good insurance. I think Anderson's a good goalie for that because he can take the load for sure. So yeah, that's my roster. I think we're pretty similar in that scenario. I really like you get 2 left wingers for trading a left winger in Alex DeBrincat. I think that's important to consider. They're both cheaper than him, and then you save money for the goaltending. That's essentially what the exercise was. Yeah, you got any lineup notes, I guess, for me right now?
Yeah, I like the look of that. Again, there's just so much potential. Like, and like you said, if that second line or third line is struggling, you just mix them up. Like, you just create a balance. It's what every team does, right? You just try to find that balance. And even Greg on your fourth line is someone who you could move up to the third line and move Gaudreau down if necessary. Like, it's just being able to shuffle it and having the depth to do that and the flexibility. And one other thing about the lineup that I wanted to note was that, like, I was almost willing to just put Angus Crookshank on the fourth line or Igor Sokolov or somebody like who one of these young guys at a cheap deal. I only signed the veteran because I figured they should need forward depth. I mean, I think these guys, like, I think even a Schmeichel, somebody could step up and earn that role. I just think that having depth after last year especially is so important. So if you can sign an Aston Reese, or if you can sign, obviously, a Corey Perry or somebody for around $1 million, like, I'm very content with doing that for sure. And at worst, they get scratched. Like, it is what it is. Yeah, do you have a note on that?
I wouldn't be surprised. So I scroll down here to the non-rosters. These are guys who have entry-level deals, whatever it is, but they're going to probably play in Belleville. I wouldn't be surprised if it's just a rotation of all these guys throughout the season when injuries happen. Like, this is what's good. Like, they've got a lot of these players who are cheap, first of all, but can also step in. Like Tyler Boucher, man, if he stays healthy, I really, really like what he could possibly bring in a bottom 6 role. Like, I think his game is suited to that a little bit. So that's enticing to me. If one of Joseph or Gaudreau goes down, Corey Perry, like all that, like, and Crookshank again, Philip Daoust is another good one. Like Cole Reinhardt, I like a lot of these players, and this kind of goes back to all those draft picks where you're kind of scratching your head. And now we're 3 years removed. 3-4 years removed from those drafts, being like, oh yeah, I can see why, they pick guys who are maybe not going to be home run swings in offensive talents. But look, in a situation like this, they're perfect players to kind of sub in when injuries happen. And also, I like the look of Belleville next season. Like, I think this is going to be a good Belleville Senators team. So it's enticing for sure.
The timelines are just lining up nicely with the prospects because I do feel like I said, I'd be very confident having Crookshank, even Ostapchuk, like maybe not Boucher yet, but one of those guys on the fourth line, I'd be fine with if we're pinching pennies here. Like, I'd be very content with that. If they sign a goalie, for example, and it's a little pricey, like Dan Anderson, and you don't have the space to sign another guy in your fourth line, I'd be very happy having one of those guys. Or a rotation, because I do think they're going to play games, and you want them to at this point. You want them to start transitioning into that NHL role. Even Järventie hasn't played an NHL game yet, but he's a guy who could eventually slide in. So I do think, and especially if DeBrincat's leaving, right, like Järventie's a left winger. He might be a guy who you look at down the line and you want him to come in and be a goal scorer. So there is potential there, and you want that to happen. I'm getting kind of excited here about this trade. The thing I'm a little not confused about, but wary of is, like, I know we can wait to trade DeBrincat until like before his arbitration date, or even sign him, whatever, trade him at the deadline. But if you don't trade him until after free agency, like, you don't really know what your needs are in free agency. That's my one issue. And I guess you can just base like what you sign in free agency, you can base a DeBrincat trade off of, but I'd rather trade DeBrincat, know what assets you're getting, because if they get a goalie, well, now they need a lot of forward help. So now in free agency, you got to go hard for forwards, or you got to make a trade for a forward. Like, as time goes on, the market gets smaller, and after free agency, which is on Saturday, like, a lot of players are going to be off the market, right, and not available anymore. So Ottawa kind of needs to know what they need, whether that's, a goalie, whether that's a winger to replace DeBrincat, whether that's somebody to fill out the depth, because they're probably going to need to at least bring in a few players this summer with DeBrincat going out. Either way, though, I think there is a lot of potential here, and I think that, like, with the assets they get, they can always flip it. Like, even that second-round pick you got, I'd love to just use it, but at the same time, a second-round pick, like, I know Dan Vladar was somebody out of Calgary, the goalie, who I considered trading for, actually, in this exercise. 2 years at $2.2 million, kind of just been a backup so far, but he's young, he's like 25, and he's shown great potential. They want a second-round pick for him. Like, you could flip that for Dan Vladar, and all of a sudden, you've got, a potential backup goalie who could, eventually develop into a starter. You don't know. So that's the type of deal where I think, regardless of what they get for DeBrincat, you can turn it into something else that's exciting. But again, it's on Pierre Dorion, and like the two lineups we have, I'm comfortable with that. They would be better than last year. I really am, even though you don't have DeBrincat. The one thing about this and doing this that I realized, because we've both been adamant about keeping DeBrincat, and I wanted to just pay him, and I still do, but like, it works in the long term. So with the cap expected to jump, you can keep the entire core. The trouble is this next year, because I did actually do it where I signed DeBrincat for this coming year, and it's really hard to fill out the roster if you keep DeBrincat for this year and next year. Like, the next 2 years would be tough. Once the cap rises in 2025, 26, you can make a nice lineup, but at that point, like, you've kind of wasted 2 years because you don't have that great of a lineup with depth and goaltending. So I do see where people are coming from with that and wanting to move DeBrincat. Either way, I'd still be happy, but it seems like a trade is coming, right? Like, it seems like we're on the brink here. And at any time here, it could be announced, because like, the trade market is moving. Deals are happening. Players are coming off. Like, if Dubois gets traded to LA or somewhere else, like, he's going to be the domino that makes it all fall. So, and on Dubois too, I guess we should just say the rumor, or what was supposed to be said, was Gabe Vilardi and Alex Iafallo were the two pieces from LA who are two top 9. Vilardi was more of a top 6 players this year. And they would be going back to Winnipeg, plus another asset or two. So that's like a pretty hefty deal that I think Ottawa can kind of look at and say, if we can get something close to that, like, Vilardi's a guy I would have loved to have. Big, puts up a lot of points, 23, like, he's going to be cheap. That's the type of guy you want to get. So yeah, we can kind of base that off Dubois and see what happens.
Yeah, that's kind of what we were saying. Like Dubois sets the market, and whatever deal happens with him, and it's good. I think I had a little bit of a Twitter thread. Like, it's good that to bring, like, if the Jets make a hockey trade and want pieces back that are going to play on their team tomorrow, it's good for the Sens because they want that too, right? The thing with DeBrincat, like, probably worst case scenario is that they just take him to arbitration, right? I think that's worst case, which is still good because you got Alex DeBrincat next season, which is, it's great. But then you kind of risk the like, he'll probably walk next summer, all that. But I don't know. I mean, I think waiting isn't that bad, just because, yeah, like, you might not know what your needs are, but I think I want to say that they've analyzed the free agent market and said, look, we're not going to fill his boots with anyone on this market, right? Uh, that's why I like a Goudreau over a Bertuzzi or whatever, or a I don't know who I can't remember who, or like a Bunting. Like I'm not going out and spending money on Michael Bunting, Barbashev. Like what's the difference between those guys, right? Like yeah, they've shown they can do it in the playoffs. So has Barkley Goodrow. Like it's been a few years removed now, but that's the thing. I mean, he did it last year too. He was great for the Rangers in their run last year. I think if he might have been actually he might have been injured. I don't even know. I'm just spitballing here, but that's the thing. So I'm not upset with the trade I made. I took I was gonna throw a first in there, but I think the second, like if there's a first round pick in there, you're like, oh, okay. But since it's a second, it really kind of makes it like a bit more realistic, I think. But it centers it around Alexei Lafreniere, so I like that a lot. I also like the ones that you made though. I like those too. The problem, I just like you need two dance partners for that, and then that just gets so tricky for me. Like, what if you flip him to Nashville and then Philly's like, nah, we're not doing that deal with Joseph and all
That's
that.
why I
And
said though you might be able to like if not Konechny, you could try to find somebody like cheaper, like a
yeah,
Connor Brown or somebody to fill in into
yeah,
that role. Not that that's replacing DeBrincat, but it's just balancing your lineup, right? Like there
yeah,
are
for sure.
options.
For sure, and maybe they can swing a 3-team trade or something. I don't know. Like, I looked at Colorado actually. So when they made the move for Johansson, and then they've got Landeskog on the long-term injured reserve. Like, they have a little bit of wiggle room. They got to sign a bunch of RFAs and stuff. But like Alex Newhook had a tough year. Like that kind of player. Like there's so many teams, and I would imagine every team is calling Ottawa about DeBrincat. So I'm sure Dorian's phone is ringing off the hook right now. Yeah, so this is a fun exercise, man. Like cap friendly is absolutely insane. I know NHL teams use it all the time, and there's that famous picture with Dorian where he had it in the background, and people might have been making fun, but if I was a GM, I'd be using this tool all the time. Like it's a satisfying way to kind of organize all the contracts and stuff because I don't know how the hell these guys keep track of it all the time.
Yeah, it is crazy, but it's a very efficient tool. And again, like you gotta watch on YouTube to get the full experience with this episode. But I'm gonna make a post as well at some point here in the near future. The other player I was just thinking because I was looking at the trade board a little bit, that's kind of come up in rumors is Tyler Toffoli. If he could be an option, like if maybe it's not Konechny, maybe you trade for Toffoli. I haven't been as high on him as others just because of his age. He's not a great skater and he's kind of slowing down. But at the same time, he just put up a career season production wise in Calgary, and Calgary is not a great team. He's a guy with 1 year left on his deal. I think he's 31, and you could maybe trade. I don't know what they'd want for him. I would trade like a second round pick maybe, but I'm not sure if they want like first round value or what's going on. He's a guy though who, if you could get the right deal, I'd be happy to replace Konechny in the lineup with Toffoli, even though he is older. It's just that prototype of player who I feel based on their careers are a little bit lesser than DeBrincat. They're not an exact replacement, but they still provide you with like I don't know, maybe 50 to 70 points in that vicinity, and like 20 to 30 goals, and they can be a two-way player as well. That's kind of what I am hoping to get back, along with a young player. I think the young player is the real key for me in a DeBrincat trade. I think you need to get someone, not just a prospect, but someone who could play now and who is on like an entry level deal, or like Lafreniere, who's a restricted free agent you could sign for like $2 million or whatever it might be. Just who can come in and play right away, but also save you money. That's the big thing. So if they can get that plus a high pick and maybe flip the pick, maybe use it, whatever you want to do, that's basically what I'm looking for in a trade. And then yeah, free agency too. I was kind of thinking you might try and sign Bertuzzi or something. I just don't think that'll happen. I don't think, like, realistically, I'm looking at it, and the thing about free agency is that the player has to want to come here too. And I don't know if those top guys who are going to have a lot of offers on the table, if they're really going to come to Ottawa. Not to discredit us at all, but it just hasn't been a theme that players necessarily want to come to Ottawa in free agency regarding the city compared to like a lot of the American cities with the taxes and stuff. Yeah, and Bertuzzi too, like they get overpaid. Bertuzzi's going to get overpaid. Barbashev is going to get overpaid. And pretty much everybody else is too. Connor Brown is the one that always sticks out to me where I feel like he might be willing to come back on a decent deal. But again, he's more of a third line player in an ideal situation.
Yeah, so that's we're hitting an hour again here. We're becoming the hour-long pod. I think that's 3 in a row now for us. So yeah, thank you to everyone. Let us know in the comments on Twitter. We're gonna post these, and just like what roster would you rather? I think we're both kind of on the same track, but just different players, different pieces, term, money, all that. Let us know what you'd rather. And yeah, I don't think this will be the last time we do that because that was really fun. But again, huge week for the Ottawa Senators. They need to make something happen, probably, right? One way or another, a domino is going to fall. Is it a DeBrincat extension? Is it a DeBrincat trade? They draft? Do they end up drafting on Wednesday night in the first round? As of right now, their first pick is 108th overall in the fourth round, so that'll be later on Thursday night. Yeah, and we're actually both of us we can confirm this now. Locked On Senators are doing a live stream before the draft on Wednesday. Both of us will be joining at about 6:05 p.m. before the draft. So I don't know what they're going to ask us. I have no idea what we're going to talk about, but we'll definitely touch on some Sens stuff. Hopefully, maybe by then there's some news to break down, because last year, if we'll remember, July 7th was draft day. Pierre Dorion made a trade for Alex DeBrincat 3 hours before the draft with Chicago. So that was the big news that day. So maybe it'll be something similar, but just getting DeBrincat out of town. So Brennan, any last words here for our listeners after an interactive offseason that we just had?
No, I mean, I just like hopefully Karlsson wins tonight, the Norris, and we can keep having the Twitter speculation about that. But yeah, I'm excited to know what people think about this. I don't think our deals were too one-sided. I think it was pretty reasonable for both of us. So yeah, I'm excited to see what happens here. But 2 days till the draft, and then a week till free agency, less than a week. So it's going to be exciting.
And thank you, everyone, for tuning in to episode 19. Everyone have a good week, and we will see you. I guess we'll see you on Friday, but maybe we'll see you again before that with a surprise live stream if we need to. So thank you, everyone, for joining. We'll see you next time.